Okay, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the world and following this incredible meeting. So my name is Mario Martone. I'm a theoretical physicist, a research assistant professor at the Bisan Center for Geometry and Physics, as well as the Young Institute for Theoretical Physics in New York. And I'm also one of the leaders, co-founder of Scientists for Palestine, which is an organization that is hosting today's webinar. I will take just a few minutes to give you some information about Scientists for Palestine before passing it on to our incredible guest that will entertain us for the next hour and a half. So let me share my screen and so that I can run with you some useful, one second. I'm having some technical problem on sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, so today's webinar, it's called From Education in Palestine to Israeli Military Courts. And the star of the webinar is Ubai Aboudi, who has been recently released from jail. Haynes will tell us much more about the event today. What I wanted to tell you about is about Scientists for Palestine, which, as I told you, I'm one of the co-founders of. And it's an organization that was born in 2015 and funded by the Collective of Theoretical Physicists, which has grown quite considerably in the last 5 years to have now more than 100 members, mostly in North America, Europe, and the Middle East, particularly Palestine. But we also have members in other continents. So we can say that we are truly an international organization. The mission statement, you can find it on our website. It's to promote and facilitate the integration of the scientific Palestinian community in the international scientific community. So what do? We have done multiple initiatives. The main ones are what we call advanced physics schools. We hope to really expand way beyond physics. Our membership already has expanded throughout all disciplines of the sciences. But those are schools that we have initiated in 2016 at the Arab-American University in the West Bank. And then we had another in 2017 and 2019 at Birzeit University, another, one of the largest universities in the West Bank. And we have plans for a physics school in 2021. And we really try to have these almost yearly initiatives that involve getting all the graduate students and undergraduate Palestinian students to meet with internationally renowned scientists. We really hope to extend beyond the West Bank and into Gaza. Another initiative that it will feature prominently throughout the talk is these ideas of having international meetings for science in Palestine. This really started in January 2018 when we called the first international meeting at University of Cambridge in the UK. Then it continued in 2018 in November at the Columbia University in New York. And then really upgraded into the marvelous meeting that we held in January of 2020 at MIT, where both of our speakers really plugged into the work of Scientists for Palestine, both Haynes and Ubai. We're now working on the fourth international meeting. There are no concrete plans, but we really hope to continue this work, which has been tremendously successful in bringing together people of all walks of life and all positions and all kind of nationalities to really unite into supporting the goal of uplifting science in Palestine. We have long-term goals of continuing webinar series, which we're really focused on in this pandemic time, and then build mentorship and exchange programs for Palestinian students, scholarship programs, and innovation, entrepreneurship, and facilitate business, and basically, do our part to build the entire infrastructure of science in Palestine and use our network and our connections. Of course, we're very clear that the main obstacles for the creation of a thriving scientific community in Palestine is the occupation. So we're not shy in also discussing the full scope of what are the challenges of scientists in Palestine. So this is basically most of our our topic today. But before I pass it on to Haynes, just let me tell you how to get involved if you're interested in Scientists for Palestine. Here is the main information, so you can take a screenshot of this if you are interested. We'll probably conclude with this slide, the meeting today. You can go on our website, follow us on Facebook, on social media, and please do email us if you're interested. Without further ado, I think this is good for now, and I'll pass it to you, Haynes Miller, Professor of Mathematics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a tremendous friend and colleague that has been done an immense amount of work in the last few months to support Ubai in particular, but even beyond that, just the work of Scientists for Palestine and science and Palestine in general. Haynes, pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Mario. It's really an enormous pleasure to be here to host this meeting, this celebration of the release of Ubai Aboudi from prison. Welcome, Mario. Welcome, Ubai. It's so good to see you here.
Oh, thank you, Haynes, and greetings to all. Thank you for everyone, for the great work you have done and for your support for me and my family.
So let me introduce Ubai Aboudi a little bit to the audience here. Some of his diverse activities have included program coordinator and supervisor at YWCA. He served as monitoring.
Thank you for everyone, the great work you have.
Thank you, Ubai. He served as monitoring and evaluation officer with the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, and serves now as executive director and research in socioeconomic rights at the Bisan Center for Research and Development in Ramallah, Palestine. Ubai is a US citizen, born in Bloomington, Indiana. He is husband of author and activist Shahada, and father of Khaled, Ghassan, and Basel. Ubai was arrested on November 13th, 2019, and has just been released on October 22nd, 2020. I'd like to say a word about how important Ubai and the Bisan Center has been in its collaboration with Scientists for Palestine. It was a central member of the organizing group for the conference that Mario mentioned at MIT this past January. A number of organizers of that conference met with speakers from Palestine there in the Bisan Center. We were lucky enough to have 9 Palestinian scientists come and describe their work to us here in Cambridge. And so you can imagine the horror and dismay that we felt when we learned of his arrest in November of last year, and the trouble that it caused, the annoyance that it caused to see that this arrest was accompanied by the destruction of the Bisan Center website, the destruction that took several months to repair. So one of the high points of the conference, since we couldn't have Ubai himself, was a very moving video that Shahada provided for us that was shown on Friday night to an audience of some 250 people or so. And I think we have that queued up here, so maybe we can watch this video of Hind right now.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of my husband, Ubai Aboudi, I would like to welcome all the attendees of the 3rd International Meeting for Science in Palestine. I wish you all a pleasant stay, and I believe it is going to be a rich gathering with remarkable scientists from all over the world. Ubai had worked very hard and really wanted to be part of this significant meeting along with other Palestinian scientists. But as many of you know, Ubai was imprisoned by the Israeli military, which ironically blocks him from presenting his research about the Israeli suppression of science in Palestine. Ubai has been detained for 2 months now in an Israeli military prison, along with over 5,500 Palestinian political prisoners. So our family had to spend Christmas and New Year's separated. I was able to see Ubai last week in the Israeli military court for only 2 minutes with lots of distractions from Israeli security soldiers. I wasn't allowed to speak to him. Luckily, he had lost some weight, but he was feeling very cold, as he was wearing 3 trousers in order to try to stay warm. That's what I understood when he yelled back to me before the Israeli security screamed us both into silence. It was a very painful experience to see my husband, who is a scholar and an intellectual, be shackled by his hands and feet as if he were a criminal. I was also really terrified when I saw another prisoner sitting next to him in the courtroom with a broken jaw, literally seeing his mouth positioned on the other side of his face. This is just another proof that Palestinian political prisoners experience torture by Israel and are subject to inhumane treatment while in custody or during interrogations. This, as you all know, violates international laws and conventions. The last time I visited Ubai was about a month ago with my 5-year-old son Khaled. It was a hectic day for us, waiting outside in the cold all day till the military finally decided to let us in to visit. The Israeli prison guards refused to allow me to bring in any books for Ubai that day. The guard directly literally told me, that education is forbidden in prison. That was a direct quote from him, imagine. The Israeli military imposes restrictions with regards to prisoners' education, and many educational books that were in the prison from times before were confiscated as a collective punishment towards the prisoners. Ubai's next visit was scheduled a couple of days ago, but I wasn't allowed to visit him as he was being punished with other prisoners for standing in solidarity with Palestinian prisoner battling cancer who died in Israeli detention. The prisoners returned their food that day in protest of the deliberate medical negligence practiced by the Israeli military and occupation authorities. Ubai firmly believes in standing up for justice and solidarity, even if it is to his own detriment. Despite everything, Ubai remains in good spirits and optimistic about the future of science in a free Palestine. Greetings to all of you from Palestine. Thank you all for your solidarity and support. I will surely pass your salutes to Ubai when I see him next. Freedom to Ubai Aboudi and to all prisoners of consciousness.
Well, thank you, Hind. You can see how distressing it was to envision Ubai in prison during that conference. So welcome, Ubai. It's so great to have you here with us now. And thank you so much for being willing to talk about your experience so quickly, so soon after release, and to put it into a broader context that we're looking at. Before we get started just talking, let me point out that this is being run as a meeting. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. You can see the little chat bubble at the bottom of your screen. So that's how we'll keep contact with the audience. So Ubai, there are many things to talk about. You're executive director of the Bisan Center. Maybe you could introduce the Bisan Center to us a little and what it's about, what its roles are.
Hello to everyone. I hope that you'll find it, this webinar, that you'll find it informational and educational about the situation of Palestinian prisoners. I'm happy and thankful for Scientists for Palestine, for Haynes, Mario, everyone that participated and held this webinar. Bisan Center is a development organization. It's a non-governmental civil society organization, non-governmental, that works in Palestine, has been started at the beginning of the first Intifada in Palestine. That's way back in 1989. The idea behind Bisan Center was the need for a think tank on for progressives in Palestine on how development should be formalized, how development should be contextualized in Palestine. The center has a message of wanting a vision that wants to spread the culture of freedom, justice, equality, and dignity for all in Palestine and, of course, all over the world. We are really proud of being aligned with the poor, the marginalized in the society. We work with the poorest segments in the Palestinian refugee camps, in rural areas in Palestine, and me myself have continued the work of previous directors and the previous staff at the center for all of these years. Bisan has worked under difficult and changing circumstances and increased pressure. Of course, my arrest had also part of that, the increased pressure we had as a center, but it's also the entire context of, as the United Nations describes it, as a protracted crisis, or the other word for it is a prolonged occupation that doesn't seem the international community has a will or the power to end it. For Bisan, we work in our main areas of work. We focus on gender justice. We try to have gender as an encompassing issue in all of our work. We believe that the Palestinian society will not be free unless there's equality, gender equality and gender justice in the society. We also believe in that the oppressed, the poor, the marginalized have their own vision on understanding of what development is, the global south. We align ourselves with kinds of thought of Samir Amin, for example, and the World System School of Analysis that says that today's world is governed by injustice, and there are today's the systematic injustice and systematic oppression of the people must be solved at the root causes and the root problems of it. And of course, we also see ourselves working in different fields to help people and Palestinians especially, and also have connections with our friends globally, whether it was in the global south or it was in also the progressives in the global north, to see also the connections and benefiting each other in the global struggle against injustice and inequality for a better future for all.
It really sounds like the Bisan Center is a progressive, active organization that has analogs in many, many other countries. There are dozens of other examples of very similar organizations elsewhere in the world. You know, I noticed on the website that the Bisan Center has just launched a new journal, an electronic journal called The Progressive in April. Congratulations on that. Could you talk a little bit about that journal?
Well, thank you. The Progressive actually was something we worked upon as having, the first issue was ready before my arrest, but it was issued during my arrest. The second issue is coming in the next couple of days. The idea of the Progressive of having not just critiquing the progressives in Palestine, not just critiquing what's happening on the ground, but also offering a way forward, offering the alternative. So what was needed in Palestine is a journal that can give voice to the people, the progressive mainly, and this is, we understand also that this is a wide definition, but we see that their voice is important, and throughout their ideas, I would say methodologies, but they believe in the general sense of equality, social justice, gender justice, all of those notions, and they can present their ideas on a platform that doesn't have any biases and that doesn't practice any kind of censorship. And I think that the voice also of Palestinian progressives is very important for painting a way forward for the Palestinians and for the region in general, because in our community, although we all suffer from the effects of the colonization, the Israeli colonization of Palestine, but we also have our problems as a society, a patriarchal society, our own problems of radicalization, etc., that we also work to give voices for the progressives to spread enlightened ideas.
It's going to make a great contribution to this conversation, I'm sure. It's great that it's continuing. You know, I'm curious, Ubai, how did the connection, this connection between Bisan and S4P that's been so important, how was that started? What initiated that?
Well, it was actually, I think there was a mutual connection between Bisan and Scientists for Palestine. We have a friend, Lami Siddiq, which I met when I was in the United States about 2 years ago. We met at a conference for Palestinian diaspora there that were from, and we had a long discussion for a couple of hours. I was a guest, she was also hosted and the keynote speaker. And after that, we kept the connections between us, and she heard of the initiative of Scientists for Palestine, and they wanted some help on the ground here in Palestine. So when she talked to me, I had this email exchange and WhatsApp messaging with Mario, and then, I don't know, things flowed from that point. I understood what Scientists for Palestine are trying to do. I was impressed and willing to help. And actually, we discussed the idea of cooperation with them in our board of directors and with our main staff. And they were all very happy and excited for the idea. And from their side, I think Mario was also found that there's an alignment between Bisan as an institution and the goals of Scientists for Palestine.
They're so lucky to have a partner on the ground in Palestine. This gives me a chance to give a shout out to Lami Siddiq for all the help that she's given in putting us in touch and in preparing for the conference and during the conference as well. And since then, thank you, Lami.
A shout out for Lamis for all her work and for her solidarity, and she's amazing.
So let's talk, if we can, about your arrest on November 13th. Could you tell us something of what happened?
Well, actually, I was working at the office until 11 p.m. I was, we had a meeting, a late meeting with part of the social movement in Palestine about socioeconomic rights and especially facing monopolies that are taking the rights of the workers and the rights of the people. It was a long day, and it continued the meetings until 11 p.m. or quarter to 11. At quarter to 11, I finished, closed down the center, took a cab, went home. I reached home very tired, told my wife I'm very tired, just wanted to sleep. At 3 a.m., my wife woke me up, Hind, and told me that the Israeli army was banging on the door. I got up, got dressed, let the army in. Of course, the kids were awake and witnessed also the Israeli army coming inside the house. I can't remember the number of soldiers, maybe 15 to 20. I can't remember the exact number of them. They had female and male soldiers with them. My kids, of course, were terrified. I tried to calm them. I tried talking to the Israelis to be calm and what do you want coming to my house at this time, this period. They asked for my ID, Palestinian ID, and literally I had lost track of my ID, lost it a couple of days ago. Hanan, my colleague at Bisan, told me she found my ID 3 months after my arrest in the organization car. So I told him, he told me I need something, proof of identity for you, or I will search the entire house and turn it upside down. So my mind skipped directly to my US passport. I gave him my US passport. He saw it and he told me that I am under arrest. I said goodbye to my family. They took me outside, handcuffed me in the hallway, put blindfolds on my eyes and took me to an Israeli Jeep. In the Israeli Jeep, they drove me for around 20 minutes. Then they got me out of it and put me on, transferred me to another Jeep. I think also at that moment they transferred me from one unit to another because they asked me what my name is and removed the blindfolds a little bit to see my face and then returned them. After that, they took me to an Israeli military camp. They tied me up, they not tied, handcuffed me and put me in a container with 2 Israeli soldiers up until 6:30, maybe 7. This is, I'm talking between 3 a.m., the time of arrest, and 7 p.m. I remained maybe in that container, just handcuffed on a chair, blindfolded for another 4 hours. Then they took me to what I came to know later as عوفر prison. Of course, I had no clothes on me, but the clothes that I was arrested with, my pajamas, my, what do you call it? And after that, when they put me in عوفر prison, they searched me. They did a strip search, complete strip search of me before entering عوفر. And in عوفر prison, they put me in a place. I was not admitted in the sections up until around 8 p.m. So I was arrested at 3 a.m. and I was not admitted in the sections of عوفر until 8 p.m. When I entered the sections, the prisoner sections in عوفر, they had no blankets, nothing. It was almost an empty section. It's like that's just a reception section for prisoners. The room didn't have any kind of food. We shouted from the window of the room to other prisoners if they have some kind of food, because I haven't eaten since almost 3 a.m. or before that, since 11, let me say that. And they sent me some food with the prison guard, and I stayed for another night. The next next day, they sent me to a military court that told me that I will be extended for 72 hours in waiting for my administrative detention decision from the Israeli military service, or not military, from the Israeli Shabak, which is intelligence service, Israeli intelligence service.
So you were put into administrative detention at that point. Could you describe for the audience what that is, what administrative detention is?
Administrative detention is a practice that the Israelis have inherited from the days of the British Mandate. The administrative detention is actually unlawful practice by the Israelis, because it's the way that they practice it includes mass arrests, arrests based on opinion, arrests without due cause or due process. In administrative detention, an Israeli military intelligence officer can take a decision of arresting you anytime between 1 month and 6 months that are renewable. Some prisoners have remained in administrative detention on the basis of secret information for years. I think the longest continuous case was for 5 years, and some prisoners have spent around 20 years on and off with administrative detention in Palestine. So when you're talking 20 years, they might come for 3 years, be released for a year, and then rearrested for another 3 years, and so on. In administrative detention, my lawyer told me it's like going and trying to have a boxing match while you're blindfolded and one arm tied behind your back. You don't know what the charges are. You don't know what the material are. The Israeli prosecution and the military intelligence do not share that information. They only disclose some of that information. They only disclose some of that information to an Israeli military judge also. So it's the same kind of military apparatus. It's the judge, it's the prosecution, and it takes also all of the implementation of the punishment that they decide to put upon you.
So according to Adamir, that tracks such things, as of September 2020, there were about 4,400 Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli prisons, including many children, and 350 in administrative detention. This isn't an uncommon status. Eventually, you were charged and there was a trial in a military court. Could we talk about the charges that were brought against you and how they came to be supported?
Well, I got a feeling that because there was so much pressure and so much awareness about my case, they couldn't, and me being a dual citizen, they couldn't keep me with dual citizenship, Palestinian and American. They couldn't keep me for long under administrative detention. I got a feeling that they might try to go another way and try to frame me up for some charges. In the end, they put some pressure on some people that were under torture, and got some, all of that they could get from them was that membership in illegal organization. And this kinds of charges, actually my lawyer wanted what the evidence was and what were the case files and how the confessions were attained, the basic things that any lawyer would has a right to have in order to defend his client. And he was denied access to all of that information. Not a single piece of the case file was delivered for my attorneys.
Again, are there better examples of justice being done in these military courts? Is this a common?
Well, just this is a mass arrest. This is a mass arrest system. This is a system that's meant to keep the Palestinian people under subjugation. Since 1967, there has been over 1,100,000 arrests, according to the Red Cross, of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And if you take that calculation, that today there are about 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip altogether. So when you're talking about the male population aged 15 and above, you're talking about almost 1 in every 2 Palestinian has experienced arrest by those military courts in one form or the other. Those cases of the courts, there's no justice. 99.7%, 0.76% is the conviction rate of these courts to Palestinians. These courts do not recognize IHL, do not recognize the Geneva Conventions, do not recognize basic even procedures of fair and due process in being trialed. For example, one of the things that these courts rely on is that the burden proof is not upon the state. The burden of denial is upon you as a person that's being accused. So they can arrest you, come up with charges for you, and you have the burden of denying all of the charges, of proving that those charges are not correct. Not the state that has a burden, like in any democracy in the world, of proving that the charges that they put up against you are correct. These courts practice a wide range of abuses to human rights, especially Palestinian human rights. And actually, in my incarceration, my imprisonment, I read the autobiographies of Nelson Mandela, Huey P. Newton from the Black Panthers, and Malcolm X. And they all talked about the court systems that they faced because they were all imprisoned, trialed, etc. And I felt a deep connection with the way that they describe it. It's like you're sentenced even beforehand. Even in my sentencing, when in the end, you have to reach a deal to be able to get released as soon as possible. So in my sentencing, when the agreement to the deal was reached, because my lawyers were denied access to materials, and my lawyers also told me that the shortest way to getting out of prison is reaching this kind of deal. And I had in mind the case of Muhammad Halabi. Muhammad Halabi, he's a World Vision employee. He has now one of the longest trials, about going on for around almost 5 years. Muhammad Halabi, they have no proof on him that the charges that they made, but they are not releasing him up until even today. And you can, and I think we can share the link to his case file also. So I took my lawyer's advice and went to that deal because we were denied the ability to do a proper defense. And when the prosecution said 1 year and 1 week, I remember clearly the judge coming and saying, "Why the week?" The judge. And then she sentenced me for 1 year and 1 week. So it's a facade. The Israeli military intelligence is, has all the decisions, and they are just a puppet case show for them.
So you were then being held in Ofer prison, which was built in 1968 near Ramallah on West Bank territory, not in Israel. Yeah. While you were there, can you discuss some of your experience there in Ofer prison? What were the dangers? What was the experience?
Well, it's twofold. You feel a sense of camaraderie, a sense of the Palestinian prisoners stick up to each other, try to help each other, and you feel that there's an oppressive system also that's targeting you as an individual and as a human being that's trying to dehumanize you. Everything from needles that you need to fix your clothes because they do not allow us to enter clothes that much. They say theoretically every 60 days you are allowed to enter some clothes for you as a prisoner. But every 60 days, my wife, when she would come to try to enter clothes for me, you would either see clothes being returned, you would either find that those clothes, they did not enter everything, or you would see sometimes for the slightest reason, your family would be denied visitation. One of the main problems, for example, when getting inside the prison also was the availability of clothes, of pillows, of basic stuff that you do not think that you will be missing because you do not have the money or the means to buying it from the cantina, and you are not also always or constantly allowed to enter it from outside. The other main thing was also, for example, the quality of the food. It was very bad. The quantity also is very bad. A system of oppression. You will be fined, beaten, sprayed with pepper gas for any slightest whim of the Israeli prison guards. Also, if you tried, for example, to pursue legal affairs against them, for example, raise a complaint, etc., you will know it will go nowhere because they are complicit in violating our basic human rights. For example, in the case of Assayah, who was a Palestinian prisoner that died of cancer in Israeli prisons and was denied treatment. Basic health treatment is a human right, and you cannot deny that for anyone. We had an objection, and we actually also returned the main form of objection for us is the ethical objection of not eating. We abstain from eating. But when we abstain from eating, they punish us. They put on us fines. They subjugate us to humiliating searches, body searches, etc. They destroy they confiscate and destroy our belongings, family pictures. We were denied visitations also because of returning the food. And those kinds of protests are, what do you call it? You are gravely punished for those kinds of protests. But on the other hand, if we do not do those kinds of protests, we will never ever get any rights in Israeli prison. One of the main issues that we faced in Israeli prisons is also the treatment of young prisoners, of child prisoners. Those are prisoners under the age of 18. Some are even 12 years old, who were treated with, I would say, the worst cases of human rights violations. You felt also an ethical responsibility towards those kids. On the other hand, we had the forms of trying to also be productive and effective inside the prison. We had, although education is prohibited by Israeli practices, but we had education, we had books. We actually also, educational books are also forbidden, but they do not read all of the books that are coming in. So we get sometimes some kinds of educational and philosophical books. For example, the GRE, a graduate level exam, because I thought that I might have it in my future to do a PhD. I still have a master's and I want to do my PhD in the future. And so my wife tried to get me a book for the GRE. Once it entered, the second time it was rejected of entry. So the first time they did not notice that it was educational. The second time they noticed. Other things are you try also to have to talk with the people, to have educational sessions on life affairs. For example, one of the proudest things that I did was we held an educational session on CEDAW, the Treaty of Eliminating All Forms of Discrimination and Violence Against Women, because there's a rhetoric about that. And we have the text, and of course, we at Bisan are pro-CEDAW. I myself am with CEDAW agreement. So we had actually, I did actually a seminar, a small seminar for the prisoners on the importance of this agreement, on why should we Palestinians push forward for its signing and being part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll talk about education in prison. I wanted to mention the name of Maher Al-Akras, who is now in his 105th day of a hunger strike. And I believe he started as a prisoner in Ofer prison.
Yeah.
We wish him very well. It's very terrible.
Well, actually, Maher just succeeded. He got his demands of ending administrative detention against him. He's supposed to be released before the end of this month, I think on the 26th.
Okay, so good news comes out right here in this webinar. So one of the people that you met, I think in Ofer prison was Imad Barghouti. And I'd like to hear your description of your interaction with him. But let me just introduce Imad Barghouti to this audience. He was arrested several months ago. I don't have the date in front of me here. And I think we have a few slides to show the audience who Imad is. Imad Barghouti is a professor of theoretical space and plasma physics at Al-Quds University. He's 58 years old. We heard in an earlier webinar, S4P webinar, we heard from his daughter, Duha, one of his daughters, who's a medical school student at Al-Quds, describing who he was and his arrest. He has a physics PhD from Utah State University. His main field of study is the Earth's ionosphere. So the ionosphere is a region of ionized particles above the stratosphere, that is 80 to 1,000 kilometers up. It's the region that mediates the interaction between the air that we breathe and outer space. Here we go. This is an image of Imad in his office and a statement from Al-Quds. He's author of 42 scientific journal articles. And I see he was arrested on July 16th. He was in fact scheduled to be released by court order today on November 8th. And we were looking forward to celebrating his release also in this webinar. But just 4 days ago, he was instead placed on administrative detention for a period of 4 months, and that can be extended. So instead of celebrating, we are now praying for his release and working towards his early release. So interesting, here's a statement from Scientists for Palestine. And he wrote, Imad himself wrote a letter from prison, which I'd like to read if we have it up here. Here's Duha and his family. This is, Eric, do we have this slide with, yeah, here's part, just a fragment of the letter from Imad that he wrote in prison. I know justice will never be served as long as Palestinians remain under occupation, but I take courage and inspiration from the words of Desmond Tutu, who said, in a situation of injustice, if you remain neutral, then you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Inspiration for us all. So, so he is now still remains in prison in administrative detention, and Scientists for Palestine and other organizations are working hard to protect him and try to secure his early release. So we hope for a good outcome. What was your interaction with him, with Imad, like in Ofer prison, Ubai?
Well, actually, I didn't know Imad from outside. I got introduced to him inside Ofer prison. When we started talking, I recognized his name, and then he recognized me also from Bisan. So we had an interaction. We spent actually many hours talking to each other, discussing different topics, and even giving knowledge to each other on our specific areas of specialty. Imad is a positive person. He's really ethical. He tries to be of service to everyone. He tries to help the people, educate them. Imad is also, I would say, he's really humble. Even some prisoners who had a very low academic attainment due to their circumstances in life, he was willing even to help them with what he can. And when you're talking about a professor in astrophysics coming to help someone who hasn't even graduated high school. He had no problems even with those. We agreed. We actually did a couple of educational things together in prison. Me focusing on socioeconomic rights, on what's happening in Palestine, the abuses to our rights of emancipation through Israeli measures, control over our economy, control over our natural resources, violations of international law in that aspects, the role also of international cooperations, and sometimes also, let me say, the complicity of some states, some foreign states also in Israeli crimes and what's happening also for us. Ahmad focused a lot about physics. He actually also gave courses in mathematics inside the prison. We actually also had a collaboration of helping a student finish his master's degree in عوفر. He had done most of the coursework and had 1 or 2 courses left. One of them was in economics, and I helped him with that to finish this course. And of course, Ahmad, as a professor, also had a part in supervising the work and making sure that it's academic and up to the standards. Ahmad, we also tried to get some books from the outside to help us maybe also do some teaching inside the prison. I would say that the works, for example, of Ilan Pepe on the ethnic cleansing of Palestine were instrumental in that, giving people giving people the theoretical framework of analyzing what's happening to Palestine and the Palestinians. And for me also, I benefited a lot from Ahmad. I can remember for us sitting in a corner of the courtyard for a couple of hours, and he's explaining to me the Monte Carlo method of statistics. And both of us discussing can it have implications in economics, and it has implications, but we are thinking of using it for minimum wage analysis, effects, etc. So from the one side, it's imprisonment. On the other side, it's resistance through education.
Exactly. So education may be forbidden in Israeli prisons, but they can't stop it from happening.
No, they can't.
We've all been suffering from COVID-19, from this pandemic. What were the effects of that in prison?
Well, actually, when we first heard of the virus, it was in March, prisoners, we had a feeling of uncertainty, we had a feeling of fear. The Israeli prison services in the first few months did zero precautionary measures. They didn't provide us with masks. They didn't provide us with sanitizers. Even some basic foods that were that could help boost the immune system, like garlic, lemons, etc., were suddenly missing from prison and were not provided for us prisoners. Of course, for my part, I have allergies, and I was a bit worried for my part of getting the COVID, because I had allergies in my lungs, and usually I'm very susceptible to flu and such diseases. The general prison population has many prisoners with that are elderly, that are with risk category. So what happened is that we prisoners started actually returning our food to the administration and going on hunger strikes for short days in order to pressure them in taking action, doing the tests, doing the providing us with masks, social distancing. Social distancing, when we say in prison, we want the prison guards to remain their distance from us prisoners. And that didn't happen. The first case that we heard of a prisoner from عوفر was infected with COVID-19 was from a released prisoner. The Israeli prison administration refused to admit that he had COVID, but the PA, upon his release, did a COVID test for him, and they confirmed that he was infected in COVID-19. Prisoners for example, عوفر, they talked about at certain points of having around 20 cases of prisoners being infected with COVID-19. And when you're talking about 20 prisoners infected, just to give you a context for that, every 8 prisoners live in a single room. That's 3 meters by 12 meters long. And the prison sections are very tightly close together. So you're talking anywhere between 70 and 160 prisoners in each section, according to the size of the section. So if one prisoner gets infected, he will most definitely infect his room, and through the prison yard, he will infect the other prisoners in the section. And the only source of infection for prisoners was the prison guards. And the prison guards actually, we would hear later on that this prison guard is away. He was, for example, because you're staying in prison, you know which prison guard comes on which day. And you would find that for several weeks, there was these prison guards that were absent, and you would find out that they have COVID-19. And some of them, the day before, were on duty inside of prison, had their shifts, had their work inside of prison. So the situation with COVID, actually, we reached a point where we thought of going on an open-ended hunger strike in order to put light on the issue of COVID inside the prison and pressure the prison administration in taking steps for ensuring the health of the prisoners. I want to say that all nations in the world released prisoners in the situation of COVID, except the Israeli occupation. The Israeli occupation released the criminals in Israeli society that were being held, but us Palestinians who are political prisoners, there are educators, professors, medical doctors among us in prison, civil society workers, etc. We were kept inside, even though the sentences you are talking about, most of the Palestinians, the 4,400 political prisoners, most of them have short-term sentences less than 2 years.
So thank you for all of that discussion of your experiences in for prison, Ubai. Before we go on, I want to call folks' attention to the chat, which has a lot of links being put up in it, and some questions too. So if you do have questions, we'll have an open mic question and answer session in a few minutes. And you can also feel free to put your questions up in the chat, and we'll get to them in a few minutes. But Ubai, I wanted to ask your opinion about what effect your conviction and imprisonment has had. It's had a tremendous effect on you and your family, of course, but also on the Bisan Center, I suspect. And so could you talk about that?
Well, there's a phenomenon worldwide that's called the shrinking space for civil society to work. The phenomenon of shrinking space is that governments and the current world system that's in operation today doesn't give way for dissenters, for people that are critical of the situation, much room or much space to work and talk, etc. For us as a civil society organization, we actually been feeling the shrinking space before my arrest. This is part of the global and local movement, the criminalization of human rights defenders, the prosecution, the arrest. This is not just in Palestine. I actually been to Philippines before my arrest in 5 months, I think in April. I was in Philippines and I listened to human rights defenders there about their experience of prosecution, arrest, etc. in the Duterte prisons. In Bisan, actually, they had a huge attack against them from right-wing organizations, Israeli right-wing organizations, and even, I would say, hackers, etc. The Bisan website, which we had recently updated just before my arrest, actually, and it cost us a lot of money, a lot of resources for us as a small center. Was taken down, and it took us a long time to be able to get it back working from cyber attacks. And this actually also coincided with the visibility that my case took on my work. As Bisan Center, also for the shrinking space, actually we also suffered because we rely on what I call it, we rely on foreign funding, on fundraising from other organizations, etc. Some of the prospect partners that we were going to sign with and work with in the coming months, they actually, some of them got afraid because of the arrest and of the propaganda that was made. So the center also suffered financially. I want also to give also notice for the changing circumstances today. More, I would say, more restrictions are being applied on Palestinian civil society. As Palestinian civil society, your work as a critical, being siding with the poor, siding with the marginalized, siding with the weak, being critical of the occupation is not even getting a lot of space from traditional donors or organizations that might open up that we used to collaborate with previously. Of course, on the other side, I want to say on the positive side, we had also our strategic partners like Scientists for Palestine, like other organizations. Also, I don't want to mention everyone, but they were actually wonderful also in the period of my arrest. They stood by the center. They also supported the work, and this is how we continue our work today. For Bisan also, the targeting is part of, I think, a systematic targeting that doesn't want a progressive voice of Palestinians, of critical Palestinians to be there, connected to the world. Our work actually also with the connections, those connections that we are making on the world scene with Scientists for Palestine, with people from Philippines, Belgium, Germany, etc. This kind of work actually exposes a lot of things, exposes the crimes that the occupation is doing against the people, exposes corruption, exposes, I would say, exposes the marginalization that people are also suffering, the abuse to human rights. So those kinds of connections are targeted by the Israeli right wings, especially, and trying to have a scare, I would say, a scare tactic of targeting those organizations, those people that are supporting us in the global north and the progressives, and issuing a lot of slander and sometimes even prosecution. For us in Bisan, we've been actually harassed by the PA, Israel, Palestinian, actually big business monopolies, private sector. We've been harassed by all of those sides, whether it was arrests, whether it was crackdowns, whether it was also lawsuits sometimes even in Palestinian courts due to works we did on exposing the abuses to human rights and the abuses to basic socio-economic rights that the people have.
I want to call out this phrase that you use, the shrinking space for Palestinian civil society. I think it's a really, really key thing for us to be paying attention to, and things like the Bisan Center are a bulwark against that. So there have been several questions on the chat. Maybe it's time to turn to question and answer period. One interesting one that you just mentioned, Ubai, I think, is do Palestinian leaders ever intervene on prisoners' behalf? How can they, so it goes on, I've never heard of President Abbas doing this. Are they then complicit with the Israeli government?
Well, no, I would not say that, but look, the thing is that Palestinian narrative, when you're saying that Palestinians are suffering from ethnic cleansing, the Palestinian narrative itself is part of the narratives that this is one aspect of the ethnic cleansing also, not just removing the people from the physical space, but also removing their stories, their names of the neighborhoods, the names of the villages, their stories of what happened here. Was it, for example, in this village, what happened? Was it in Sabra Shatella and a massacre, or was it a great victory for the Israeli army? This is, for example, when we're talking about the clash of the narratives. For the for Palestinians, the prisoner issue is something that all Palestinians unite around, because of when you're saying that almost every household in the West Bank and Gaza has a prisoner or has had a prisoner at one time. And every house and one of every two Palestinian males almost over the age of 15 has experienced incarceration. And those issues are not taken lightly in the Palestinian community. So people are doing, I think, what they can. Can the Palestinian leadership do more? Of course, it can do a lot more than what it is doing right now. But I would not say that there's any complicity between the PA and the Israelis on the repression of the Palestinians through imprisonment. But there is, I think sometimes the PA is like a bad defender, a bad lawyer for a just cause. They sometimes, so if you're having a just cause and you hire a weak lawyer or a bad lawyer, and that doesn't make the right statements or the right interventions in the right time, locally, internationally, etc., then this will do more harm than good. For example, the issue of the systematic imprisonment and abuse of Palestinians, this is an issue that can be taken for the International Court at The Hague. It's a war crime. It's obviously a war crime, the way that it's being practiced. Systematic murder inside of prisons, torture. I met people in my incarceration, that had, as my wife described, that had their bones broken due to torture, that had lost their sight, that had sometimes even reached the brink of death because of this torture. And when you hear first-person accounts from them, you reach realization that the Israeli prison system and the Israeli system in general does not hold accountable Israelis that abuse Palestinian human rights, basic human rights. And it doesn't matter if you are a professor in astrophysics like Dr. Ahmed Barghouthi, if you are a civil society advocate like myself and many others, if you have international connections, if you are just if you are a dual citizen, If you are just a Palestinian, then this gives them a green light somewhere to abuse your rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so this is an open mic situation, but to control this, we have 74 participants here. Please raise your hand, your Zoom hand. You've got a blue hand that you can find in the participants column. And if you raise your hand, I'll try to recognize you for more questions for Ubai. Okay, David Kattenberg. So you have to unmute yourself, David. And it would be nice to show the video too, if you could.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hi. Hello, everybody. Here I am in Winnipeg. Hi, Ubai.
Hello, David.
It's wonderful to see you obviously healthy. My question to you is this. I'm wondering what degree of solidarity and discourse takes place between Palestinian prisoners from the different factions. I know there are folks from Fatah, from Hamas, from Islamic Jihad, they're all in there. I'm wondering to what degree we see unity amongst prisoners in Israeli jails. Political unity. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, unity among people. Look, if you put people in the same circumstances, in the same abuse for human rights, in the same situation where they are treated as a bloc, obviously, they will work together and come together to try to push back against those policies. All Palestinian prisoners inside the prison come and I would say have those certain values because it's been such a long period of having Palestinian prisoners. Actually, the first Palestinian prisoners were around since even 1948, and those were not mentioned. Tens of thousands of Palestinians were imprisoned after the declaration of the State of Israel, and they did not have any Red Cross visits. They did not have anything up until almost the 60s. In 1967, there was the new influx of prisoners from the West Bank and from the Gaza Strip. And those Palestinians started to have their own traditions inside of prison, their own norms of like any community of what things are good practices, what things are not allowed inside of prison. And one of the main things is that solidarity with each other. For example, if a prisoner has a problem, a health problem in the night, and the prison guards are not coming, then you would call out to all prisoners from all the rooms, and everyone would start shouting and banging on the doors so that the prison guards would come and take this prisoner to receive treatment. Other things is that the tradition of, I would say, hunger strike in prisons. The tradition of hunger strikes is that whether it was individual against administrative detention, like the case of Meher al-Akhras, or whether it was collective, Palestinian prisoners discuss together on how prisoners can succeed in that, how they can support each other, with everyone with his own individual demands, and how they can everyone can agree on general demands to go for it, and I would say in the struggle to get those rights. For example, Palestinian prisons, everything that Palestinian prisoners have inside the prison is a result of their struggle. Everything from a mattress to sleep on, from the television, from the radio to listen to outside radio, from the quality and quantity of food, from having healthcare services inside of prison, all of those are having family visits even. All of those are the result of struggle. You might think that those things are what I would say would come as a result of laws inside the Israeli community, but but most of the Israeli laws are not even applied when it comes to rights. If they have duties on Palestinians, they are applied to us. But if it has rights, no, it's not applied. And even things like the right, for example, with a telephone call for your families. Palestinian prisoners are denied that. So that's also an issue for struggle. 2 years ago, Palestinian prisoners, I was not in prison, but I was aware of that. Palestinian prisoners all Palestinian prisoners wanted to go on hunger strike, demanding to have payphones inside the sections in order to be able to call your family a couple of times a week, because not all families can visit. And it's also, the visitation is allowed actually once a month now. So calling your kids for 15 minutes every other day, this is something that you're talking about basic rights. Those are things that everyone will go and have a kind of unity on it, on how we can achieve those things.
Mm-hmm. But politically speaking, are there any political discussions and any degree of political unity or convergence in prisons?
Look, the politics are mostly left to the outside, because in prisons, the oppressor doesn't treat you as a political entity. It treats you as a Palestinian and full stop. So the political differences between Palestinians are usually left for the outside. In prison, Palestinians are Palestinians. Whatever their political affiliation or non-affiliation is.
We've been talking about the particular case of prisons, Israeli prisons with political prisoners, but of course there's a broader issue as well. Gaza is, some people say, the largest open-air prison in the world. And the refugee camps are another form of incarceration that we should all keep in mind. There's a question from Pat Westwater, who has been an organizer in the Boston area in support of Palestinian rights for a long time. In the US, that Trump and Ambassador Friedman have just announced that they would recognize the US taxpayers would support academics working on this in Ariel University and universities in the settlement in the West Bank. Can you talk about what impact that might have, or what US policies that we can advocate for to help in this situation?
Look, for the US, historically, the US has been a great supporter for Israel and has also helped Israel, I would say, escape international, what do you call it? International accountability for its actions against Palestinians. One of the main steps, one of the main things that Donald Trump did actually was even foregoing even the, I would say, the general form of human rights discourse that the US administration usually talks about. So it tries to keep a certain kind of balance. It supports Israel. I don't say that it's that any US administration has supported Palestinian rights. All US administrations have supported Israel, but have done so under discourse, general discourse of two-state solution, of human rights, etc. While physically on the ground, the Israeli settlements have expanded the living space. The Palestinians in general as a community face a shrinking space today. 60% of our lands in the West Bank, for example, are not accessible. 85% of our water is not accessible. A main thing is, I would say that one of the main things is that having the US administration abiding by their own speech, the own rhetoric that they adopt on human rights. They go around the world punishing regimes all over the world on the ideas of democracy or on the issues of violating basic human rights. And Israel continues to get this unconditional support. And in the Trump administration era, it has even gotten unconditional support for the annexation and the continuous ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Al-Hamsa village is a small village that's north of the Jordan Valley. It's a small Palestinian village. That consists of 85 people. Among them are 35 children. Their village was destroyed a couple of days ago without even a single statement from the US on this act. You know, a complete village was destroyed and its people were driven out of their land that they lived upon it since even the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. And they are said that they do not have the right to reside on their lands. And this situation, like for example, also Al-Araqib in the Naqab area, Al-Araqib village has been destroyed over 130 times, and the people have rebuilt it 131 times. So it's an ongoing struggle for us Palestinians. We do not expect a lot from the US administration per se, but for organizers, for people working on the ground, we actually feel a lot of camaraderie with them. For example, the struggle of the Black Lives Matter movement, we see them as strategic partners for us Palestinians, especially progressive Palestinians. And we think that those people can put pressure on the decision makers of raising those issues exactly in the Senate, of raising also public awareness of the violations that the Israeli military occupation is doing against Palestinian basic human rights. And this kind of public awareness and this kind of pressure on policymakers in the Senate or in Congress, I think will lead in the long run, medium and long run, not in the short run, of course, to a real change in certain aspects of the policy.
And with an election just now, it's a moment of change, a moment when things aren't completely set in concrete, a good moment to exercise some of that pressure, I think. Lamise Deek has her hand up.
Hi, Haynes. So first of all, Haynes, thank you so much for your brilliant moderation and your kind work. I wanted to pose questions to both you and Ubai. You know, Haynes, as you saw, it took a lot of work, you know, kind of really detailed, time-coordinated launches and campaigns. But Haynes, your work and your role around Ubai's case, you know, as a longtime activist was unusual for me, as a bit of a jaded activist. You outlasted activists, you know, even involved in this formation who felt like they couldn't keep working on Ubai's case. And you produced this article with, I believe it was Franz and Riyad and Asaf Kfouri, who also did a brilliant job. But I think, you know, just looking on the outside, kind of straddling these worlds, what I found particularly compelling about you and the group of people you worked closely with was this kind of sense of innocent and pure incredulity at the abduction of Ubai, and this really novel approach to your deep commitment, you know, and I told this to Ubai as well, to your deep commitment in a way that transcended pretty much everybody else I saw. So I wanted to know, number one, why were you so moved and so committed? And what challenges did you face in your sector as you were mobilizing your community, the science community around you, and producing, you know, these articles and writings around Ubai's case? And to turn it to Ubai, so this is going to be a multi-pronged question. And, you know, the flip side of this, Ubai, as we also discussed, right, is the proper contextualization of Palestinians is being at the front lines of the struggle for global human dignity and safety from the power of corporations and the power of the military industrial complex. So directly and indirectly, your work and your sumud in prison is a service to all people across the world, and we're grateful for that. I wanted to correct you briefly into my follow-up, my two follow-up questions. You know, we actually first met many years ago, without going into detail, in Palestine around the work of agricultural workers. And then we reconnected in New York. And when we were reconnected, we were in and discussing the political space and new internal shifts and a private, meeting that I had launched that focused on two things primarily: the reunification of Palestinians, the majority of whom live outside, and Palestinian self-sufficiency and a kind of reimagining. And then it had been just weeks prior that I had proposed to S4P to adopt this kind of understanding of the need to use science for self-sufficiency, to include a broader understanding of science and who is involved in building the infrastructure of science in Palestine, and then centering Palestinians. Around the time that you were abducted, there was a lot of targeting of people involved in work that centered around Palestinian self-sufficiency and Palestinian mutual reliance. So my first question to you is, why do you know that Israel and Israelis see Palestinian self-reliance as such a threat? And number two, your case was really critical, Ubai, in exposing the danger of administrative detention to people internationally. But what I think was left out, and we didn't do as strongly as we needed to do, was the direct link of using this framework of administrative detention to escalate, specifically the administrative detention of you, to escalate the torture of your friends and colleagues, and how this is used as a mechanism of escalating torture and further sentencing. So if you could talk about these two, Ubai, I'd be immensely grateful. Alhamdulillah, as-salami taban.
Thank you, Lamis. I think she has two questions, one for me and one for you, Haynes, right?
But you have the floor, Ubai.
Okay. Look, the idea of self-reliance is embedded. It's not allowed. It's the not allowing Palestinians to be self-reliant is embedded inside the Israeli official establishment. This is actually evident if you look at the policies since 1948 and up until today. For example, one of the main things that were combated by the Israeli occupation is the Palestinian farmer in himself. The Palestinians, for example, in 1967, we had a 45% of the population working in farming. Although it was mostly subsistence farming, it was not farming for the market, it was farming for self-reliance, etc. But it was very productive farming, and this I can give evidence to. And it was sustainable farming, it was organic farming, it was farming that was accumulated through the generations, etc. So what Israel did is that after 1967, they actually had, I think, about 1,000 decisions relating to economic activities of the Palestinians, 1,000 military decisions since 1967 up until 1994. This is in one study that I reviewed. And most of those decisions targeted things like regulating water. The West Bank has a number of water resources, the usual springs, etc. But it also has a very, I would say, a very substantial underground water system around a water reservoir under it that Palestinians are not allowed to utilize. And this water reservoir is actually being utilized mostly by Israeli settlers. So when you think about it, the establishment and effectiveness of Palestinian interventions in areas such as farming, economic emancipation, etc. Those activities are not allowed at all for Palestinians. Even for another example I want to say is that the interventions that are being done, for example, by international organizations in the West Bank, I would say the economic interventions. If you are coming in the West Bank as a UN agency, one of the places that you have to coordinate with is the Israeli civil administration. The Israeli civil administration will allow a certain type of activities to be implemented in the West Bank that leads to connections between Palestinian producers and or consumers and the Israeli markets. Connections between the Palestinian markets, for example, the Palestinian producers in the north, the West Bank, and the connections between Palestinian consumers in the south of the West Bank to have those inter-market connections and that inter-market reliance, those kinds of activities are prohibited, and actually those kinds of activities are fought against. If you take the issue, for example, of land reclamation, I used to work for the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, and the basic work of the union is developing agricultural land in Area C and other areas where farmers can farm, because 60% of our land is Area C. So the farming land, most of it, of course, is in Area C. So those, the work of this unit is developing those farmlands, giving, building agricultural roads for farmers so that they will be able to reach their lands. And this kind of work is being targeted and being demolished even by the Israeli occupation. So if you have this small plot of land that you want to reclaim, to have small retaining walls around it, so you would keep the soil from eroding. If you want to plant it, etc., you would find a stop work order in your piece of land, and you would find the Israel, and it's private, and you would, it's a private piece of land. So you have the documents proving your ownership of it, and you cannot challenge these orders. If you try even to go through the system of challenging them, most cases fail in that kind of challenge. Other Palestinians that are advocating for self-reliance or advocating for Palestinian emancipation, I think it also has to do with the lessons from other, I would say, activists worldwide that were able to achieve that. For example, we in Palestine, although this is not a well-known fact, but a lot of us have also read the works of Gandhi, of Mandela, etc. Gandhi, for example, in his great march of trying to make salt and boycotting British salt, or going back to the traditional Hindu dress that was manufactured in great quantities and efficiency by the people of India before the British Empire destroyed their productive sector. He actually put the first steps towards India's emancipation from the British mandate. And I think the Israelis know that very well, that if we Palestinians are self-reliant, we produce what we eat, we are able to we wear what we also, we produce what we wear also. And if we are able to be self-reliant and have connections with Palestinian communities, with the outside world, etc., then this will be the first major concrete step towards emancipation. Maybe one of the ideas that I was talking about is how Israel encourages Palestinian farmers to plant strawberries, to plant small cucumbers. This is actually one of the works that was done, interventions by USAID in the West Bank. This is intervention in hundreds of millions of dollars. Palestinians do not consume strawberries in general. we consume maybe small amounts of that. It's for us, it's as a population, we are a poor community in general. It's very expensive. People cannot afford to consume it. It takes a lot of water, and our water resources, although we have many, but we have a lack of access to those water resources by the Israeli occupation. So when you find the USAID coming and doing humanitarian interventions in the rural areas in the West Bank, distributing to Palestinian farmers all of the equipment, all of the seeds, all of the seedlings, etc., to have a booming business of strawberry production, that its only market is the Israeli market. And on the slightest whim of Israeli commander, the access to that market is denied for the Palestinian farmer. So you would find that the Palestinian farmers are being systematically driven out of their land, not just by the occupation, but also, I think, by all of this discourse by international organizations that do not encourage self-reliance, but encourage connections, I think, to, or encourage subjugation to the colonized economy, to the colonial economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ubai. You know, I might answer Lamis's question to me. I greatly enjoyed hearing her call me innocent. I suppose that my original interest was that here's a clear example of human rights violations that's been supported by the United States without any pause for a long time. And it just seemed that, that I should grab an opportunity to try to have something to say about that. What happened, in fact, was that I encountered the most amazing group of inspiring people. And one of them is sitting here in front of us right now, Ubai. Welcome home. Congratulations. Good luck on your PhD goals and hopes. And I'm sure that the whole audience wishes you well and for a bright future. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. There is one final slide about S4P that I think we'll show on the screen here. Get involved. Thank you, everyone. This has been, for me, a real joy.